I'm going to start with two French postmodern thinkers, Foucault and Deleuze, the great blood brothers of French philosophy. And both of them have their own rather novel take on freedom. In the first piece, which is a summary of Michel Foucault's great book, The History of Sexuality, Volume 1, and I'm summarising it in 4 arguments. This was quite a short book, but as with all Foucault, you have to really listen to find out what he's saying. He makes the argument right at the end. And this was the book where he tries to persuade you that a lot of the dialogue about freedom, about desire, is just slavery in another name. And if you really want to be free, you're going to have to look for it where you're not expecting it. That's going to be the first one. The second one is from a much more difficult philosopher, often thought to be Gilles Deleuze. But I'll talk about that when I come to it. So, this is The History of Sexuality, Volume 1, told slightly story-wise, which means I am doing voices. Has it not struck you as the most jocund of jokes that for the last 150 years or more we've prattled on endlessly about our sexual repression? I think we found a new way to flirt. But I'll tell you it's far darker. Over the same period of time, we seem to have confused our identity with our sexuality. Tell me who you have the hots for, and I will tell you who you are. We have taken then the great welter of our natures, our hopes, our dreams, our ability to catch each other's eye, and crushed them into a binary opposition of genders rooted in biology. Or if you're lucky in these enlightened times, the chocolate box selection of permitted, recognised, legalised sexualities. We've taken them then. We look upon our desire in fear, wondering where they are already taking us, and throw out the bones of our lusts, consulting doctors, magical or medical, to tell us who or what we are. We have taken them, the wild tempest of our souls. We've sexualized it, and we've medicalized the result. And what kind of power is involved in all of this? This is clearly not the noisy power of the state, the kind of power that says, do this, or else. No, it's a far quieter power. The kind of power we have as we are caught up in each other's lives, bound together with relations, able to influence and to be influenced. The kind of power that got you out here tonight. A power that waxes and wanes over the course of a life, so that sometimes it feels we can do so much, and at other times nothing at all. A power that cannot, I think, be ever separated from how we understand it, but rather what we think and how we act are caught up in a strange conjunction. Conjunction that moves off, echoing the lateral abyss, the abyss that gapes between us all. Under the single banner of sexuality, over the last 250 years or more, 4 great movements have coalesced. First, there has been a hystericalization of the female form. Women were checkmated back into their bodies saturated with an obnoxious, pervasive, corrosive sexuality. That sexuality knocked into myths of motherhood and apple pie, only seductress or sister. And anyone who didn't conform, they're not normal, but don't worry, we can treat her. There has been a gathering fear, amounting at last to outright paranoia about what children are doing together late at night under the bedclothes or in the old barn. A fear then of childhood sexuality, a fear that opens out on endless worlds of suppression, regulation, and all too tawdry exhibition. There has been a medicalization of normality. The perfectly natural processes of conception, birth, and aftercare have become an excuse for another trip down the clinic, leading questions, prying hands under long metal instruments. 4. There has been a veritable proliferation of perversions. Tell me who you have the odds for. Animal, vegetable, or mineral. And I'll have a Latin name for it. And if I don't worry. I can always make one up. But what is really at stake in all this ludicrous expending of energy? What is happening now? Well, maybe, just maybe, For the very first time in all of human history, mankind is learning something. He is learning what it means to be a living member of a living species. He is freeing himself from the hand of death that has held him fast from so long, and from that politics of death that was so adept at arranging occasional, gruesome executions. He is enmeshing himself in a new kind of politics. A politics that must hold him fast from the cradle to the grave. Summary that was of History of Sexuality, Volume 1. It's quite a lot longer than that. The second one I'm going to do comes from Gilles Deleuze. Now, Gilles Deleuze is another philosopher, famously difficult, actually rather beautiful. And this is from a book he writes with another thinker called Thousand Plateaus. And it's very intense, it's very hard to read. But this is one of the most engaging of all the essays in it. It's called Becoming Hyacity. And in it, in an almost ecstatic piece of writing, Deleuze tries to get something about the nature of events, the nature of things that come to us beyond our experience, things that are without us, things that make our memory, things that allow us to change who we are. The piece, as I said, is called Becoming Hyacity. He's got that phrase from Duns Scotus. It's kind of the thisness of being. The rest, I think, will speak for itself. But only this. Don't worry if you don't understand every word of it. Deleuze doesn't work that way. He really doesn't. It's the words and the power of the words. There is a singularity, quite different from that of the subject or substance or the soul. The singularity of a cold breeze on a hot day, or the moor that overhangs wuthering heights, but you know is never described, or the events of that terrible September day, the one that is already before your mind, the one when buildings collapsed, men died, and a century's history was untold. This, then, is the singularity of the hyacity, that which is. And yet do not think the difference here is a matter of time. It's not that the substance, or the subject, or the soul has more time, and the moment less. Any more than a desperate calendar has more time in it than a tearaway calendar, or a turtle more life in it than a mayfly. It is rather that the time is arranged quite differently. The subject holds onto its moments, in its greedy grasp, unfolding them into memory, across which it then unfurls its being. While the event pitches itself once and forever into the wild time, the time of aeon, that opens up in the abyss between us all, a time that will not let the past stagnate in the mind, but rather takes it and breaks it against the wall of the future, so that each event is like a magic carpet, taking you between the worlds, between people you could be, people who you were, people who you will be. This, then, is the time in which a word is spoken. A word that is over, even as it is said, and yet has a power to shake up things for thousands of years. The wild time of Dionysus Zagros, the god that lives in the lightning fork of his own destruction. You have then the singularity of a storm in the desert, if only you have the desire to live it. And you haven't, since ever you were a baby and had a chuckle before you had a cell. But be warned, you give nothing to the event. You do not free it from subject, as long as you see it as an accident. Say it then, and say it with one breath. The vampire stalks at 5 o'clock on a summer afternoon, and the red eye of the vampire and the red sun are caught in the same event. Nor are events ever singular or multiple, ever finished. Rather they wash through history. Say it then, say it with one breath. The philosopher falls from the high pavement walls, under the cold January sky in Turin, as the horse is beaten to death, and the philosopher rises quite mad. And the madness of Nietzsche and death of the horse are caught here, washing through time, changing everything, right here, right now,
We must learn then to say with Mrs. Dalloway, as she walked through London's cardboard streets, "Oh, it is so difficult, so dangerous to live for but one moment on the hard round of time, as you cut through everything like a knife. To no longer be able to say, he does this or she does that. To be forever young and yet feel so old." You have then the singularity of a storm in the desert or a locust swarm, if only you have the courage to live it. What have you to lose but yourself? And you might have eternity.